I want to welcome you to tonight's learning series. My name is Heidi Allen. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and an Associate Professor at Columbia University School of Social Work. Tonight's topic is psilocybin, the holy children of the Mazatec people. And I know that I'm very, very excited to listen in on tonight's conversation, and so grateful to our guests for joining us today. This learning series is brought to you by the Psychedelic Therapy Training Program at Columbia University School of Social Work in partnership with the Penn School of Nursing, with generous funding from the Stephen and Alexandra Cohen Foundation and the Joe and Sandy Sandberg Foundation. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Heidi. I am Brooke Stott. I'm the program manager for the Psychedelic Therapy Training Program here at Columbia School of Social Work. Just a few administrative notes as we get started. As a reminder, this learning series is not intended to be a comprehensive training in providing psychedelic-assisted therapy, but to initiate dialogue and start building foundational knowledge in the field of social work. Notably, for the first time, we have a specific pharmacological drug paired with a specific therapy model under review for approval by the FDA. As social workers make up the largest segment of mental health providers in the United States, it's critical that our clients will have access to these emerging innovations in clinical practice. Also to note again, with the exception of ketamine, these therapies are not yet available in the US outside of a research setting. We're bringing you this content with the anticipated FDA rescheduling of MDMA and psilocybin in the coming years. I also want to note before introducing tonight's presenters that in thinking about tonight's session, we really felt that because psilocybin is really the biggest area of overlap between indigenous ceremonial use and rescheduling efforts, that we would try to focus more specifically on that medicine and maybe go a little bit deeper. We do ask that you please keep in mind that the views and experiences shared tonight are unique to our presenters. They're not intended to represent views of other persons, whether that's indigenous, mestizo, or otherwise, including other Mazatec healers. And I also will say that we just also ask to be patient and understanding. Miguel is going to be providing translation for Doña Eugenia. And so just to be patient that, it takes a little bit more time with the translating. There are obvious differences in indigenous to kind of Western Eurocentric ways of thinking and understanding. And so kind of some of the language and some of the questions and responses might not fit the kind of standard academic model that we've had in this. And with that, I'm happy to be introducing tonight's presenters. Doña Eugenia Casimiro is a Mazateca healer from Huautla de Jimenez, Mexico, a little town in the region of Oaxaca, brought to fame by Maria Sabina and her work with Los Niños Santos, or the Holy Children. Trained in her ancestral lineage by her mother, Abuela Julieta Pineda Casimiro, of the International Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers, Eugenia worked by her side since childhood and accompanied her throughout all of her world travels. Eugenia inherited this altar to carry on the family legacy upon her mother's passing in 2018. Eugenia is mother to 3 beautiful children and resides in her familial home in Huautla. Along with her sisters, the family carries on its traditions of doing exquisite embroidery, harvesting beeswax for candle making, and cultivating coffee and cacao. Helping other people and following the path of light and God are the deepest expressions of Eugenia's heart. And also joining us is Miguel Mendez. Miguel is a health advisor known in North and South America for his active role in personal development. His expansive knowledge integrates traditional Chinese medicine, Kundalini yoga, meditation, nutrition, and indigenous plant medicine. Miguel, who lives in Brooklyn, New York, walks an active path of consciousness and transformation. His offerings and teachings are all derived from the passion of his heart. He believes strongly that through the spreading of ancestral wisdom and the application of simple and grounded technical information, the world is evolving into a more peaceful place each day. Miguel will be both responding to questions as well as interpreting for Doña Eugenia, who again is joining us by telephone from Huautla. in order to ensure that we have a stable connection for this. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Miguel and Doña Eugenia.
Well, thank you. Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Brooke, and thank you, Heidi, and at the same time to Columbia University for allowing us to have a space, particularly to have a space to center indigenous voices, which is so important as the world keeps evolving in the different offerings that we create, either with plant medicine, ancestral medicine, ritual, and the parallel that it creates also in the reality in which indigenous people live. So with that, I first would like to introduce, of course, Eugenia Casimiro, for her to talk about herself, introduce her voice to all of you. And then after that, we'll give a little bit more of context of our relation, the work that we have been doing, and then we'll follow up with different type of conversation and knowledge centered again by both of our voices and our experience. So with that, Eugenia, muy buenas noches. Te quiero de la Universidad de Columbia, los estudiantes están acá presentes y bueno, te queremos primero que todo saludar. Queremos que si tú quieres saludes un poco a la audiencia y les cuentes un poco dónde estás ahora y si quieres contarles un poco acerca.
Voy a hacer un saludo en Mazateco. Anterior voy a decir. La migración Mitota, la segunda Estados Unidos de Norteamérica. Mitota, así dicho, y escuela. Nianicota ya, de Universidad de Columbia. México de Chile, Gaco así. Y no hay, Gabriel Sti, quien Gabriel Escota ya, José Luis, quien Gaco así, ya, Caupe de Sagrada Bendito Santo. Buenas tardes, queridos alumnos jóvenes de esta universidad de los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica. Eugenia Casimiro, indígena mazateca, madre de 3 hijos, hija de la abuela Julieta Casimiro Estrada. Somos de Huautla de Jiménez, Oaxaca, y nos dedicamos a cuidar nuestra medicina ancestral de los mismos años.
So Eugenia first gave us a greeting to all of us in Mazateco language so that we could all relate into her language. And then secondly, Eugenia is saying good evening to all of you, to all of the students, the teachers, and the people who are in this path. My name is Eugenia Casimiro. I live in Huautla de Jiménez, Oaxaca, Mexico. I am a mother of 3 beautiful children and also a grandmother now of a beautiful one. And we are here as protectors and stewards of this holy medicine she said, I am an indigenous Mazateca woman, and we are here to be stewards and protector of this holy sacred medicine that was passed by the teachings that was passed by generations, particularly through my mother, Abuela Julieta Pineda Casimiro Estrada. And I'm very honored and happy to be able to share this with all of you from the place where I am. So with that, secondly, just want to give a little bit of context. First of all, I'm very honored also always to be, walking and translating by the side of Eugenia Pineda Casimiro. I got the, destiny luck to be able to meet her and her mother in 2015-16, when the 13 Indigenous Grandmother Council was meeting here in New York, upstate New York, at the Catskill Mountains. This was an organization of 13 Indigenous grandmothers from different parts of the world that create a council in order to fulfill a prophecy of when grandmothers will come together from all different corners of the earth and pray for the peace of the earth. So that council of grandmothers lasted and traveled to all different parts of the world where they're like their different homelands. So they all together as indigenous women traveled to places like Africa, the Amazon region, Tibet, North America, Mexico, and they visit each other homeland in order to be able to do their ancestral prayers in different lands, and at the same time be able to discuss as indigenous women and grandmothers the future of their traditions and their medicines. There were different expositions of each one of their about their traditional ways either of healing and prayer, and at the same time there was an exposition of how they have been generationally carrying their different medicine bundles, which are different plant medicines either with psychedelic or non-psychedelic effects, and how they have been able to heal for generations with those plant medicines. Eugenia was traveling with Abuela Julieta Pineda pretty much to all different destinies. So she got really exposed to the council and became part of the council as an honorary way to continue the tradition once her grandmother passed. At this moment, the council is not active in the presence of meeting together, but they are still active in the way that their teachings and their legacy is still creating like the future that they planned to have it with it. I was able to be the chauffeur of Abuela Julieta and Eugenia as a volunteer, and then that entailed a really great connection of just connecting as family, as people from the earth who, you know, believe in what Mother Earth has gave us in order us to heal. And then that trajectory helped us to nourish a really beautiful relationship of learning, teaching, sharing different cultures, traveling together, and now try from my side just to be able to center again indigenous voice, and with that make the best translation as possible. And with that translation, just a note that I want to always offer to people is that even though Eugenia speaks Spanish, that is more of a colonialist language, she still and her family keep alive the Mazateco language. And so the Mazateco language has a totally different brain configuration. And so even though she also speaks Spanish, part of her brain and language really obeys to how the native language is organized through herself. So with that also, and with some specific questions that sometimes we do have in a much more Western mind, is that there are certain topics like for us could be very obvious, perhaps like a emotional center or a chakra or an energy, but perhaps that is not the cultural landscape in which they understand a lot of these topics. So with this, of course, and with a lot of you, with the perception and empathy that you have as social workers or future social workers, is that of course we understand the cultural background in which a person is speaking in order to, you know, just have the curiosity and the openness in the answer that they offer all of us. With that, Eugenia, te quería preguntar si quieres contarles un poco acerca de tu experiencia, bueno, con la abuela Julieta, viajando un poco, lo que aprendiste y dónde estás ahora y qué es importante para ti en este momento como una mujer mazateca. Entonces, dame una pausa, les hago la traducción a ellos y después te paso el micrófono a ti para que hables acerca de ti, de tu vida, tu experiencia y de dónde estás ahora. So I'm just asking Eugenia to offer some of her, you know, background and context of where she was together with her mother, the experience of being part of the 13 Indigenous Grandmother Council, and also where she is right now in regard to her tradition, to her beliefs, and to the place right now that she is serving. Entonces, ahora sí, Eugenia, a continuación puedes hablar. Y si te pauso es simplemente para hacer una traducción. Gracias.
Ok. Ahora yo me encuentro en mi lugar, en mi casita, con mi Puebla, de Jiménez, tratando el trabajo, el compartimiento, este trabajo como guía, como un poco, quiero decir, estar con la responsabilidad de crear la medicina sagrada como Mi experiencia como en la parte humana, cuando tú vas en la vida caminando sin saber qué encontrar, nuevos mundos, nuevas personas, vidas aparentemente diferentes. Sin embargo, dentro de esa experiencia, de esa prueba de compartir ciertas ideologías con otros hermanos de otros países, tenemos mucha similitud en la cuestión de los sentimientos, de esas ganas de querer cambiar los corazones, los pensamientos, y dentro de todo nuestro juego de esta vida de querer enlazar esas partes de cambiar los pensamientos y profundizar en quién eres como ser humano, a través del compartimiento con otras culturas, con otras tradiciones, aprendes demasiado, que solo no tu cultura, tu tradición, tu gente son la verdad absoluta. Cuando tienes cierta ignorancia, porque entonces no has tenido la oportunidad de salir o no has tenido la oportunidad de convivir con otras ideologías, piensas que solamente tu verdad es la absoluta. Mi experiencia dentro de los viajes con la abuela me dio mucho que valorar, primeramente como ser humano, posterior, la seriedad de qué debía cambiar en mí para poder enseñar o para poder dar un poquito de lo que había aprendido a otras personas con las cuales iban a estar como mi responsabilidad, como lo hizo mi madre.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. So Henny is sharing that right now she is in her home, living a human life with her 3 kids, enjoying her town and enjoying her culture. And when she talks about her culture, talks about how in the position in which she is enjoying a rich culture that allows her to live certain type of like traditions, that allow her to live certain type of rituals, that allow her to live certain type of calendar that they follow as well. She said that even though sometimes we are right now sharing a lot of these traditions to people from all different parts around the world, there is something that might be different in the way that each one of us does things, but there is a common point or a common denominator or a point of conjunction, that is the feelings and the sensations and the emotions that we all share as humans, independently of the way that our culture or our tradition allow us to represent different stages. Part of the experience of traveling with Abuela Julieta Pineda was for her to be able to actually know that there was a world outside of her traditions. And by having the opportunity of knowing that there was a world outside of her traditions, there was also the big realization that there are different truths in life, that everybody and every tradition, let's say, vibrate or have a different interpretation of what is truth. However, by knowing that there are different truths, there is also a way to know that we are all connected at the essence of what we do. And that essence of what we do, how she is right now, let's say, studying or focusing again, is through the feelings, through the emotions and the sensations that we all share together into that basic level. Eugenia, ahora si quieres te puedo preguntar un poco acerca de, bueno, cuál es en relación a tu conocimiento o tu representación de lo que pudieras hablar. Para ti, ¿qué es el niñito santo? ¿O qué quisieras compartir acerca de qué es para ti? ¿O cómo lo ves ligado, ya sea a tu tradición o a lo que quieras compartir? Entonces, traduzco esta pregunta y les puedes responder. So right now I'm asking Eugenia if she would like to share something about her medicine, her Niño Santo or the Holy Children, what it means for her culture, for her relation, having this plant medicine into her life and what it means or what she wants to share about it. Adelante, Eugenia.
De primera instancia, hablar acerca de nuestra medicina sagrada para mí es bien, bien importante, porque cuando vives en una comunidad indígena, cuando no tienes esa oportunidad de tener médicos, alópatas o médicos de la ciencia, lo que tú haces cuando no te sientes mal, cuando tú no tienes algún recurso para poder ir con un médico, nuestros padres dentro de esa, digamos, carencia económica, lo que decían era que nuestras plantas teníamos mucha medicina, había sapiencia, y a través del tiempo, a través de necesidades de la comunidad y dentro del núcleo familiar, nos enseñaron primeramente a respetar nuestros elementos, y a través de ese conocimiento que nuestros antiguos, nuestros ancestros nos enseñaron, en mi línea familiar, específicamente en la familia de 10 hermanos, nos enseñaron a saber que primeramente antes de conectar con la medicina, conectar con el niño sagrado, era muy importante y bien relevante hablar con nuestros elementos, hablar con el universo, con todo aquello que tiene vida y que a veces no lo tomamos con tanta importancia. Es ahí que nosotros empezamos a tomar más seriedad, más responsabilidad acerca de lo que teníamos en nuestra medicina para poder sanarnos. Entonces, como primera instancia, como te decía, era tomar y nuestros padres tratar de mantener nuestra salud con este tipo de trabajos o con este tipo de actividad que fue siendo bien importante y sobre todo bien sagrada cuando veíamos los resultados.
Muy bien. Gracias. So she wants to say that for her, there is sacred medicine is something that she really wants to highlight, like something really important, particularly talking from the place of her culture, her people, and from the place of their resources, because their ancestors, their grandfathers, their grandmother, the voices of the past for them, first of all, taught them that there is an intelligence and a wisdom in those plants. But before you were able to access to the intelligence and the wisdom of those plants, there was first a basic need, and that need was to connect to the elements. To connect to the elements, like the fire, like the water, like the air, and like the earth, and to connect to the elements like a contemplation of the universe itself. Once granted a lot of this connection and contemplation, then in the case of her specific family, because they are 9 brothers and sisters of Abuela Julieta, and they all were taught how to, conduct ceremonies and at the same time going through the same relation, is that in that culture, there are not too many doctors or therapists or, Western medicine sciences that available for many long time. And so their resources to heal each other and the way in which they could preserve life was through the magic of plants. And so a lot, and I'll say the magic, but also let's say the relationship of plants. And so first, to order to have that ability to go into that healing space, there was a type of seriousness, or let's say focus, that they really need to first understand in that relation and in that contemplation, so that then they could also even think about what the word healing really means. And once they have defined and understand what the word healing, then could even go into the next step of even thinking how to heal others. And so let's say in that way, and this is a little bit just from Miguel's side to kind of like weave the concept, in that way is where indigenous people start really weaving the concepts of integrity in everything that we do through healing, which means they first contemplate the universe and the spirit, then they are able to contemplate the physical expression of that spirit, that is through the elements. Once have an understanding of how these elements have dynamics, thermodynamics, energetics, ways of being expressed inside and outside, then they will enter into understanding the wisdom of this particular medicinal plant. Once exploring this medicinal plant and its own intelligence, then it will also go into the deepest place of contemplating what healing means, healing oneself, and then even to heal others. But the point that Eugenia makes a really good highlight, not only in this answer, but in many other ones, is also to understand that this is one of their main resources. Let's say from a very Western mind, that's their gold. That is the source of where they deposit their faith into healing, their faith into staying alive. So the importance of sacredness for them is not about secretive or keeping it as a secret, but is under the understanding that it is not something extra for them that they can, come in and come out, or dispose in and dispose out. And we will even talk a little bit about the difference also in the relationship for them, which they do not cultivate this medicine. So for them in Huatla to have either a ceremony or a healing space with this Niño Sato or mushroom, they will have to go to the mountains to find it, which is a totally different already understanding and perspective, because you might go up to the mountains and don't find it. So it just gives a really big difference in the way in which for us and for them, the word sacredness, it is also really connected to life itself, because it is aware of preserving that life, and it is one of the main resources that Mother Earth is offering not only to them in the present, but has offered them in other, many years of generations. Muy bien, Eugenia. Entonces ahora vamos a pasar con algunas preguntas que de pronto ya tienen ellos listas, y así podemos ampliar un poco más la conversación. So I'm saying to Eugenia that right now, if we want, we can go and have like some questions that you might have prepared so that we can expand more into the conversation. And with that, just, give different voices to our curiosity.
Folks are welcome to put some questions into the chat. I have some as well. And I think based off what you were just saying, I think the question I would maybe lead with, you mentioned the difference between finding naturally growing mushrooms and, our tendency to cultivate here. Does Eugenia or yourself have thoughts on the pill that is, synthesized in a lab, and that's really what's used in this Western medical model? And so really it's not the fruiting body at all. And I'm just curious, if either of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Eugenia, estaba hablando un poco, ¿no?, de la diferencia que existe en tu tradición y en tu tierra de poder encontrar estas plantas y este niñito santo en su ambiente y ecosistema natural. Es decir, ir a las montañas y encontrar el cuerpo físico. La pregunta de ellos es un poco, ¿cuál es de pronto tu opinión frente a tener esta relación de ir y cultivarlos cuando salen naturales de la montaña, a la manera en cómo se está haciendo una síntesis, por decir, se está sintetizando el producto y se está poniendo en una pastilla para poder, digamos, ofrecerlo en algunos, digamos, de laboratorios o en una aporte más científica. Quisieran saber un poco tu opinión, cuál crees que es un poco, ¿no? Esa diferencia que existe entre el que sale de la tierra y un poco el que está sintetizado en laboratorio.
Bueno, es una pregunta interesante que yo creo que es casi contestada, que nosotros esperamos como cuidadores todo el seguimiento que le das a través del respeto que le tienes a los seres vivos, principalmente a la naturaleza. Cuando la naturaleza te ese alimento, tienes la capacidad de decir, hoy lo siembro, está ahí.
Eugenia, momento que creo que se te está cortando y no te estoy entendiendo un poco. A ver si ahora puedes volver a decir eso, el respeto, el seguimiento. Continúa.
Que tiene cultura no regala más de la naturaleza. Para mí, lo personal, tiene un poder más profundo, un poder más, más potente para poder llevarnos a lo que cada uno necesita. No estar peleado con el no que vaya a ser sembrado. La intención de la madre naturaleza tiene como su propio poder, no por descartar y decir que los cultivados no tengan una esencia, no tengan una energía, no tengan una fuerza. Para mí, en lo personal, los que vienen de la naturaleza, los que vienen con toda la intención y sobre todo que es recíproco, cómo hablo con la naturaleza, cuál es la respuesta que la naturaleza me da a través de esta medicina que viene de ella emanada con el poder de los elementos, con el poder de todo lo que compone lo que precisamente es la naturaleza. No porque tengamos que minimizar ni descartar que se pueda hacer. Sí, hacer en pequeñas microdosis ya procesadas en laboratorio, procesadas con otra actividad diferente. No sé, no se desapruebe, pero tal vez necesites como una mayor intensidad o mayor cantidad para poder eh, una función verdadera a la medicina, ¿no?
Ujú. Muy bien, muchas gracias. So she said that it's a very interesting question because also from a place of knowingness, she really doesn't know because this is very new also just to even know really of, potency, as she said. What she really knows is that if there is something that when the earth is offering us something that we don't really create, but is the earth itself, is that there is a reciprocal relationship that we create to the earth. And much more than at this point, herself knowing or trying to say what's better and what is not, is that there is a follow-up process of respect that we create to the medicine, which is really, really important. When the earth is the one offering us the whole medicine as one for what she knows, there is a lot of much more elements in that macro micro system that that medicine has, the different elements that are composing, how they understand it, the prayer that is behind is like, at least for them, the difference in between the peel and the fruit in their way of relating, there is a much more compounded energetic effect that's simply a molecule. And so when at this time, what she said is that it is not about disregarding what cultivated mushrooms or laboratory made type of like actions could create, but it's basically just understanding that in order, at least of how they work, to understand all of the benefits that this medicine can bring, is also by understanding that really sacred reciprocal relationship that we have with the earth on itself. So that might be the place that she says in the future we could see a little bit of that disconnection. And for what I will have to say to that, I think that Eugenia's way of saying it's very new even to know, and we are under the understanding that it's not about disregarding. But what I could say about just in emotional and psychological components that I have seen, not only with this type of medicinal plant, but just in general, whenever we have to participate in our own healing, is that whenever there is a major participation, whenever we are the ones either going to look for that medicine, whenever it is not just as comfortable as some of our Western mindsets are designed, there is a little bit of much more like, wow, I'm finally here. I finally have the gift of taking part of like being partaking of this medicine. And so I think that the synthesized product, of course, it's convenient, and eventually we will be labeled either as safe or FDA approved, which is giving us a certainty for our rational mind, but at the same time is taking the deep relationship into the unknown and into the taking a risk because our health and our healing deserve it. So it's just much more about either the setting and the understanding that I feel that it will take away part of all of these emotional feelings that come when people, for example, travel to Mexico or to any other place where there is legal to do these ceremonies, and you see them with the desire to heal, but they're also freaking out. But the conjunction of those two things, their conjunction of their nervousness, the anxiety, but also the desire and the wantingness to heal, it's precious after they have the experience. So that is one of some of the way of just seeing this from both of our perspectives.
Thanks so much. That was such a great answer. Along the lines of what you were just saying, someone wants to know, do people ever have bad or negative experiences with the medicine, and how is that handled?
Eugenia, ahora vamos con una segunda pregunta en donde a los participantes les gustaría saber, dentro del trabajo con estos niños santos, ¿hay momentos en los que las personas pueden tener un viaje negativo o una experiencia negativa? Y si sucede esto, ¿cómo lo manejan? ¿O cómo lo manejas tú?
Sí, suele pasar cuando las personas a veces han tenido que, ya metiéndonos a la materia del trabajo, de la sesión, del ritual, que hay personas que tienen como ese sentimiento muy escondido de guardar muchas cosas del pasado o también sucesos dolorosos del presente. La gente a veces tiende a trascender al nivel bajo, vamos a llamarlo así, lo llaman oscuridad. Son momentos solamente saber que la persona que está al frente como cuidador y como guía o como espectador de una persona o algún maestro curandero que esté con un paciente, sabe que hay que dejar un poco transcurrir para saber y emplazar espiritualmente el proceso de de la persona que está tomando la medicina sagrada. Cómo hacer, cada una de las personas que está al frente tiene sus diferentes maneras de poder ayudar a cómo controlar o cómo vaciar o cómo ayudar a esta persona a traspasar ese umbral fuerte que está pasando. Tienen cada uno, cada médico tiene su propia metodología para poder ayudar a la persona que está con nosotros, al paciente. Y se dejan esos momentos para poder decir, nosotros digamos, ¿verdad? Esa parte nosotros cargamos, que nosotros tenemos como un apego y ayudamos a ellos, ya sea con oración o en alguna serie de elementos que utilizamos en nuestra ceremonia, algún recurso para que las personas trasciendan la parte oscura, la parte, es decir, la parte del dolor, la manejas como persona.
Muy bien. Gracias. So just for everybody to know, I know that Eugenia talks a lot and then it feels like I'm making out the answers, but I'm writing notes so that it's legit of what she's saying. We have gone through this, so but I always just want to make that kind of like clarification. So because I know that it's a long kind of like passage what she shares, but we have found that that's the best way. So she said that this is a very kind of like common question that people ask, not only people who are studying this medicine, but everybody. And she says, of course, people have bad trips. And of course, people have bad trips because it is part of life itself to have moments in which are either bad or scary, if we are going to put it under an emotional description. When do they see this the most, or when has she see the most? This she see the most when there is people, or when there are people who are hiding or have been hiding for a long time a lot of their emotions. They have either been suppressing a lot of what they have been living on the past or even in the present. And when people take the medicine, there is always either an invitation or just the moment in a space and time in which, you know, let's say for how she expresses on her own language, they go into that underworld or into that place of darkness and obscurity and probably disassociation. And those moments are the ones in which they have to be confronted with probably a lot of the things that they might not even know of how it is expressed. Of course, when you have either a guide or a teacher or a healer that compassionately is asking and is being able to observe from outside of that trip the experience that the other person is having, in her way is how to weave that is happening to that person from a spiritual understanding, and working at that moment with their prayers in how to weave that is happening to allow that person to transcend and to move into certain type of path of resolution toward their place that will create the most healing or the most balance. Of course, there are different methods, and that is kind of like the interesting part of doing this work and meeting different people who do this work, and is that everybody brings in certain way a method into how they handle these situations. They find either a method that guides the person or holds the person. In particular, in her rituals, she has different elements or different tools in her toolbox that at that moment she will help, she will use in order for what either intuitively or through your prayer she feels that will be the best way to help and to guide that person without, of course, taking them away of the experience that they came to live. From my side, just an addition into the bad trip, I think that I will actually join it a little bit into what I was sharing before in the previous answer about the way of participating in our own healing. And although it is great sometimes to ask for help when we need it and we feel lost, and hopefully there is somebody with resources and tools to be able to help us navigate something, there is also something really important and beautiful into finding at those moments some of those resources. And so, of course, we have categorized a lot of these bad trips, bad journeys, risky journeys, when people have taken a lot of these medicinal plants with no intention, with not like a vessel to have the experience. And so, of course, if you are in the middle of a subway having a very strong mushroom journey and you start also facing a really bad trip of your emotions, that could be a really, really bad trip. Yeah, but that's the way in which your intention designed that experience. And so a lot of the things that we might have heard because of all this experience since the 60s, people have been taking mushrooms, is of course a lot of people take them in a reckless way and not knowing that perhaps, as Eugenia is saying from the beginning, they were suppressing a lot of emotions. So it's perfect formula to then categorize something as a bad trip when we also are taking it in a way that we don't know oneself and we open up. And when we also open up in a context or in a container that might not actually help us to move through all of these bad trip experiences.
Thanks so much. I'm wondering if you're able to speak to the best ways, let's say, for whether it's individual therapists and guides or it's bigger, organizations and corporations. What are the best ways to engage in reciprocity? Both reciprocity with the cultures from which these medicines come and reciprocities with the earth and the environment and that side of things, and not over cultivating and not over harvesting, or what are those kind of pieces that would be best practices?
Yeah, I think that I'm going to first answer that question and then allow Eugenia to say it. And I will say, take this direction. Normally, I like to center first her answer, but this is, of course, more coming from, let's say, a mestizo person that has a little bit of both worlds and at the same time, moves and understand more in, the Western side of even capitalism, corporation, funding, etc., compared to them, because I had this conversation with herself. And a lot of where her people is as a culture is in the, we already tried this, and with this is like they're not expecting anything. It's part of a much more, let's say, humble way of being, and kind of like letting one day, as they say, let's say God or the universe balance things from where they are right now and what they give to the world. Eugenia, voy a contestar una pregunta que es acerca de reciprocidad, un poco de la gente, las corporaciones, y después te paso la voz a ti, pero simplemente quiero primero dar una perspectiva, ¿no? Desde un poco una visión, digamos, mucho más de este territorio, y después te la paso a ti. Muy bien. Just letting her know that I'm going to answer first. The first way of really understanding history is to study history and to really know what happened, to really know the full spectrum of the story. If we don't first do that connection, if we don't really open our eyes to what is reality, we will always be living under an illusion, and there will not be really reciprocity. The thing is that sometimes looking back into the history, it's painful, and we might want to avoid it because we might feel grief or guilt, and then pretty much then we are like, okay, then I'm gonna need a lot of therapy and psychedelic assisted therapy to first go through that wall. But that's the reality as healers or as people that we really want to do things. in the right way, as best as possible, because also we can get a little bit obsessed and anxious about trying to do everything so right and so politically perfectly that then we paralyze ourselves and don't move. But one of them for me is really to just know the history, just really read what happened. What is the story of Maria Sabina? What is the story of Huatla? But not just to know the history from the white lens perspective of like, these ethnomycologists went there and then he had the best intentions, but then, oops, sorry, I revealed your location. And then, people from like John Lennon to all these different rock stars start flying to Huatla just to say a little demographic. But of course, 60s, 70s, having a lot of the hippies, traveling through all Mexico to look for this magic mushroom. And the truth is that Maria Sabina was the first person sharing this medicine into the Western and saying, hey, yeah, you can eat this and this will heal you. So it already shared a wisdom that at that time nobody was having. Probably people, I don't know, in the West knew already and they were trying with different mushrooms, but some of them were toxic, some of them were not. I'm not saying that they were the only ones holding the truth, but they were the ones at the moment knowing with experience how to use it in the right way. So when all of this starts in the 60s, we have this, image of like Maria Sabina, like this great, beautiful abuela, curandera, shaman that, oh my God, she showed us the path. But in reality, she was also a poor woman trying to survive in her town because they also don't have a lot of, let's say, resources over there. And Huatla is up in the mountains. So it's a mountain type of lifestyle, which, it has natural elements that sometimes you have good cropping, sometimes you don't. And at the same time, I feel everybody, and if not, you also could learn a little bit of the socioeconomics of Mexico outside of Mexico City and rural places in Mexico. It's not a country with a lot of resources. It's not a lot of places with education and hospitals. This is a really small rural town. So from the 60s into the 90s, there is this constant wave of people looking for something, ready to pay whatever it takes, but at the same time, creating, let's say, invasion into the culture, wanting something, wanting to take something out for their benefit. We have heard this story before. So the second wave comes back again. We want something that you have. And then we also, in a way, want to own it or want to be able to reproduce it wherever we live, because it's part of that natural exchange. That's fine. That's natural. It has happened. We don't have to cry about like that dynamic. But what we need to be very mindful is that create a lot of different consequences for just this person, which of course, Maria Sabina was not the only curandera at the time, and she was not the only one, not the only Mazateco person giving medicines from the period of the 60s to the 90s. There were more. In her own isolated case, they end up burning her house as revenge of the town for all the different kind of like craziness, influx of now different money, political interest. Police categorize her as a drug dealer, not as a curandera, because, there was, let's say, kind of like a business going on in this exchange. One of her sons was killed. And then she ended up also in jail. Abuela Julieta had that, not similar, but sometimes her town also categorized it as demonic, because we also have to also understand Catholic context brought by the first wave of colonialism into the indigenous setting. So although that Huatla is recognized as the magic town of mushrooms, there is a lot of people who are not only Catholic, but Christians or evangelists, and they have that mindset that anything outside of Jesus is a sin. So that was the natural way of responding to this. So in order to create retribution is to know, what can we do? What can we do now? We cannot revive Maria Sabina. We can probably pray and say, we're sorry. And so in that way, we can start making some ancestral kind of like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, for everything that happens. If you are going to use Maria Sabina in your altar, like a lot of people use it, or print a picture, just know the whole spectrum of the story of that spirit. But in regards to retribution, I think that there is a lot to say. One, keep centering indigenous voices, because there are people that survive what they needed to survive, their son and daughters of these healers that were on the 60s and the 90s. And their wisdom is not only important to hear it, but it's also important that we center, so that even for them, they can come into a place of also digesting and processing her own trauma, because now they have a voice and they can be listened. Second, in regards to financial retribution, I think that it's just really important to have an spectrum of social work. Although there was a lot of different or extra type of challenges that were developed in Huautla de Jimenez as a town, there is people over there that, just because of the circumstances created from the 60s to the 90s, or just because life is hard there is also a lot of alcoholism. There is also a lot of, drug addiction, substance abuse. So there are also different issues that right now also, let's say, traditional curanderos are not able to just heal with their plant medicine, because right now their whole culture is also changing, and some people in need don't look into the sacred medicine because it has been told to them that either that's demonic, or because they also now have trauma around, like, yeah, but I don't know, my cousin or my grandma was a curandera and she ended up poor, so why will I even have faith in this type of medicine? And then, independent from the context and the history of Mazateco people, I think that it's very fundamental that if we want to have a relationship with a plant medicine that it's, again, sourced from the earth, is that we have any type of earthy practice that allow us as a practice to understand earth, meaning gardening, basic, or meaning, taking care of something that it's alive, because just that creates the first effect. Now, in regards to corporations, for me, the most important is also to understand that in a Western mind, sometimes we think that sending money is the way. But indigenous mindsets have also a different relationship to money, because they had not had those systems. They don't come from families that, are like financial literature. And it ends up sometimes creating more disruption than benefit. So something that I particular, and this is just my opinion, in working with indigenous families, a very good way to promote and to create reparations in a way that is not, one, invasive, two, is not condescending. It's just to support the art, help them keep their traditions alive, like the art, like their weaving. So helping them, to sell, to create, and help them to organize also, like either workshop places or community centers, and help in that same way that a lot of these traditions are not lost. Because right now, one of the biggest challenges in all indigenous community, as for us, is technology, which technology is taking away from young generations the interest and even the settings to learn their cultural tradition. So I think that those at least are different, just like inspirational or avenue ways, in which we could keep that lens of what retribution is. And last thing that it has been also my experience is, sometimes we think too big on reparations, and that's why also there is nothing I can do. Very little things can do something, and that, at least that exercise, even if it's very little, even if it is donating a cause, even if it is already helping. So we just don't have to think like, okay, let's find a huge grant, let's go and buy land over there and give them back to them. No, like sometimes starting slow and being organic is the best way to find a much more organic retribution for the communities. Let me see if Eugenia wants to say something about that. Eugenia está hablando un poco acerca de retribuciones, es decir, retribuciones que existan un poco hacia la historia de tu comunidad. Es decir, ¿dónde crees tú que hay, digamos, oportunidad? Si la gente quiere pensar en retribuciones, en brindarle algo de regreso a la comunidad que le dio la posibilidad de esta medicina a otros lugares, ¿qué crees en este momento que tu comunidad o tu lugar o una manera en que las personas podrían ejercer este tipo de retribución o energía?
Bueno, principalmente antes de mirar de inmediato las cosas materiales, es tratar de conocerse íntimamente cada persona, qué podrían aportar a cada lugar, y ellos dentro de como un examen de conciencia, como inmediato decir qué es lo que realmente nosotros obtenemos a través de este aprendizaje, de este conocimiento. Yo podría decir muchas cosas o podría pedir muchas cosas, pero más bien es sanarnos primeramente a nosotros mismos en cuestión de sentimiento, en cuestión de emoción, empezar realmente a conocer la parte que nos toca vivir en este espacio, en este mundo, en cada lugar, en cada comunidad, en cada familia, en cada grupo de amigos, de trabajo, hacer los pocos que podemos y los que nos estamos acercando cada día más a nuestro propio contexto familiar, de decir queremos cambiar un poco nosotros mismos para poder ayudar a otros, sería más bien primeramente empezar con nosotros mismos. ¿Qué podemos aportar? Esa sería la pregunta, más bien tanto para mí como para ellos. ¿Qué es lo que devolvemos con el regalo que nosotros recibimos? Eso es lo que puedo decir por ahora.
Muchas gracias. And I think that is a deepest answer. And that's why, again, I love the exercise of centering indigenous voices, because she says, before saying something material, before asking for any specific thing like, oh, we could use this or that, for her, the most important is that everybody makes like that examine your own consciousness to really get to know yourself, to really get to go really inward. That will be the first place before trying to give a retribution. That is to first know deeply yourself. And with that knowledge that you obtain about yourself, with that with the healing that you really do about you and recognizing who you are in relation to your friends, in relation to your workmates, in relationship to your community, in relationship to your space, to your responsibilities, to your projects. Then from that place, once we know who we are, then we can enter to see from that innate gift that each one of us have what we could really give. So that's as much as she would like to say about that topic.
Thank you so much. Some questions kind of coming in about like quantity and frequency. And so that is to say, does somebody need to work with these medicines more than one time? And does it need to be a big dose, or can people microdose and still experience benefits? Or does Eugenia work with microdosing, smaller dosing at all?
Eugenia, les gustaría preguntarte ahora, saliendo un poco de la pregunta anterior, ¿quieren saber un poco acerca de frecuencia y un poco de frecuencia a nivel de la medicina? Es decir, está bien que la gente tome mucho, está bien hacer dosis muy grandes, está mejor hacer dosis pequeñas. ¿Qué frecuencia, por qué o cómo, y cuál es tu entendimiento frente a eso?
Con toda certeza puedo decir que la gente, refiriéndome a la sugerencia o consejo que yo estoy compartiendo, la gente no necesita hacer una sobredosis de la medicina. Cuando tú te empiezas a preparar, que tú vas a consagrar o que vas a estar a otro nivel de conciencia, la gente se debe preparar mentalmente, que no es como si necesitaran algo para el dolor de cabeza que es extenso y tienes que tomar 2 dosis, 3 dosis, no, cuando la gente realmente está dispuesta a poder hacer un trabajo de poder explicar con el insano, a veces no necesita mucha medicina, ni excesiva medicina, para poder llegar a esa labor de conciencia diferente, para poder, nosotros tenemos una manera, una cantidad para poder entrelazar esta parte de la energía y para que nos permita a nosotros, en nuestro más profundo o profunda molécula que necesita ser sanada, no es tanta la medicina que necesita, la conexión y la disposición que tengo para poder compartir el espíritu de nuestras medicinas con nuestra parte y así no excedernos de la dosis.
Gracias. So she could say with certainty for what she has been working, and also by allowing herself to hear from other people about dosages and how they're doing, that in her experience, you don't need to have huge doses or to overdose in order to really have a benefit or to have just big doses. What she says mostly is that there is a path that becomes very fundamental, that is the preparation that you are gonna do before having any type of dose. When we have a headache and when we want to have any type of relief for any symptom, we measure the symptom and then we go for the pill for the headache in relationship to that symptom. So with this work of these medicinal plants, having a pause to really understand what you are going to be working, how you want to work through that, having the space of preparation in order to get into this medicine, it starts creating a lot of, like, how she call it, energetic kind of like waves in which your body already starts receiving some type of healing and it starts already receiving some of what, you know, the plant will do and show you. And so she thinks that by really doing that space of preparation, but also having that open space, that willingness internally to give that permission into that place, creates a better, let's say, energetic situation, a better relationship to your own individual case, in order to allow the molecule, how she said, the more, like, you know, um, let's say, deep corner of yourself, of that molecule that needs the healing, to be reached by that medicine. So there is that space of preparation. And from a technical side of how a lot of these ceremonies go, they do not do the microdosing aspect, because again, microdose, it's just from the technical side, you will have to wait, you will have to know how much it is, and like they again work with the whole body, you know, of the whole mushroom. And part of this is just the weight of what it gets or dose into a person, the amount, but there is not, let's say, a way for them, and has not been the way of, let's say, creating a long-term type of, like, you know, repetition or daily usage. It's just much more, again, just we have to think mushrooms over there don't even grow all year long. They depend on seasons, they depend on rain. So it's not something even that traditionally they could feel like, oh wow, I'm gonna harvest all of these and divide them through a whole year and give little doses, you know. It's just not the reality of that expression of the earth. And for me, sometimes I like to study that too. It's kind of like, okay, there are like traditions and techniques that are born through agriculture, and there are some techniques that cannot be possible and need different type of methodology if you are like a gather hunter. And so with that, not to say what's better or what is worse, they're just different depending on, of course, the ecosystems in which they are presented. And then on another side, just to continue, when we say about repetitions, there are repetitions of ceremonies. So some people come and repeat a ceremony. That said, if you go around Wadla, which is what I love to do when I go there, I just ask the people and I just want to know a little bit more about, like, you know, from the lady selling the roses to the person in the church to the policeman. And so, like, where is the culture around that? And so in those some of these conversations, I have learned from a lot of people that they haven't taken the medicine yet, but they're just waiting for whenever they really need it. So it's just a different understanding. Culturally, for them, it's almost like your last choice. Is your most sacred resource. So it's never just a little bit of a curiosity, or my friends are doing it, or everybody's doing it, or it's a trend, or it's a hashtag. For them, it's really just something that gets like, okay, I really need it right now. Who do I go to? Yeah. So just culturally, it's different, which also doesn't then have the need that sometimes we do feel when we either have a diagnosis or when we are creating a treatment plan, that is to have like that, like repetition. For them also, because it is their last choice or the last resources, as Eugenia was saying, there is a lot of preparation with much more than discipline. It's just like with everything that you can do for that preparation, being very respectful about what the curandero is asking you. They're very respectful about the next days, because there is also an integration phase and it includes diet, behaviors, it includes sometimes prayers, sometimes like offerings that you have to give. Like there are many more things. It's not just take and I hope you had a good time. And then after that, because it is kind of like a one life thing, then there is a different value on integration, because it's also very connected for them to faith. It's almost like, let's say, meeting God. It's like really having that door into that place, and by meeting then God is like creating the best conversation that they can have with that supreme force to really make things better now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Along those lines, I'm wondering if you would be able to speak to, so for one, in a typical Mazatec ceremony, is it likely to be a group? Is it likely to be more individual one-on-one? Or is it family members involved? What does that tend to look like?
Ok, Eugenia, ahora a ellos les gustaría saber un poco a nivel de la tradición mazateca. En su ritual, en su ceremonia, se hace más que todo en contexto de grupo, de familia, se hace uno a uno con las personas, o cómo lo trabajan ustedes.
Bueno, normalmente cuando la gente la vida de nosotros, a veces tienen los grupos de 10, 15 o 20 personas, se hace en grupo. Pero hay personas que a veces son casos muy especiales, muy específicos, que quieren tener un trabajo más íntimo o privado, o la necesidad sea más fuerte. Se puede hacer así, ceremonia en grupo o también una ceremonia individual.
In her tradition, there are different settings in which they can do the ceremonies. Sometimes there are groups that come, people that are having more of a collective, let's say, intention of what they want to come and do, either their families and they want to be supported by each other, or there is just simply a coincidence in which different people come and they do a group setting and that will, involve elements of community. But there are some instances in which some people want a desire or need, because of a specific type of works, they need a much more either focused, consolidated, or even intimate space for them to work something. And so in those particular cases, they will also do individual sessions. In just something that I have observed, it's very not that common to have just a one-on-one session, which means there is always at least a second person, either supporting or bringing the candles or just waiting for Eugenia on the side, but there is never that kind of like it's just you and me in a room. A lot of times there is also some kind of like external person, of course, in case that something is needed, or just to have that kind of like that extra neutral witness, or person that normally is a person that works with her, or her kids, or somebody who can like also be part of that. Just something that probably will expand into that I want to say is indigenous cultures have always have the medicine people in relation to their community. So that is a lot of the difference. It has to start obviously when people from far away travel to meet her, that, they meet her once, they have their journey, and then that's it. That's the end of the relation. But in a lot of settings, still, for example, in my journeys either to the Amazon or to other type of tribal lands, the same medicine person is the same person you will see, like bringing kids to the school, or will go like to the town hall. It's not like this mysterious, secretive, powerful being that lives behind a rock. I think that is sometimes like a great marketing that we create around healers to feel that they are exclusive and powerful. But, you see Eugenia walking to church, buying flowers, going to the communal things, and there is no division. Yeah. And so like, I just want to give a little bit of that, because sometimes again, in our idealization, but also like, in our fairy tales of magic and medicinal shamanism, in that we create a lot of these type of like stereotypes that are like really sacred and unique beings hidden, and they always normally really involve in community aspects. And with that said, also a big let's say difference is when we do this in a professional or in a one-on-one practice. We also have to be very careful of that relationship of power dynamics that can create by you giving someone something that will allow them to connect to the essence, to the source of life, or to have one of the most transcendental type of like experiences in their life. So it's just always for me good to observe how, as a guide, or as a healer, or as a person that is facilitating an experience, in the consciousness and in the psyche of the patient, you remain like another human being.
Thank you so much. I have a question here that is asking, are there specific ways that the condemnation of the Catholic Church affected these practices? And is the current upwelling of decolonization movements doing anything to assist a recovery of pre-Christian ways within these practices? Or is that actually of interest?
That's a great question, and I'm of course gonna let Eugenia answer, but it's a very interesting dynamic what happens in Huatla, Catholicism and indigenous practice. Eugenia, ¿quieren saber un poco acerca cuál es esta relación a nivel, bueno, no solo de catolicismo, sino de las otras religiones que puedan existir en Huatla? Un poco acerca de ellos dando algún tipo de condenación o condenando un poco, ¿no? Estas prácticas un poco más de la naturaleza, y si hay en algún momento algo que se esté haciendo como para cambiar, por decirlo así, esta representación de pronto o maléfica o satánica que puede llegar a existir en alguna de estas prácticas desde la versión de la iglesia?
Bueno, aquí nosotros estamos habituados de una forma a tener una propia creencia, como cada uno, los que podemos tener un credo y los que no, ¿no? En el caso de que dijéramos como señalamiento que realmente para mí es feo decir que sean ateos, siempre hay alguien que cree en algo, ¿no? A nosotros nos inculcaron la forma de la parte católica, pero no como una cuestión de religión institucional. Aquí se hizo como un estudio a través de toda la historia de cómo se funda la parte de la creencia católica, cuando vienen los clérigos y toman esa parte como dándole mucho respeto a nuestra medicina sagrada. Nos conquistan de una forma con la religión, con el castellano, pero sin embargo adoptan lo que nosotros como cultura teníamos. Entonces, nuestros viejos o nuestros antepasados nos hicieron esta nueva forma de vida, no como una pelea, no como una batalla, sino como una unión de querer ser más o con más fuerza respecto a las dos partes y que toda ideología fuera respetada y se compartiera. La cuestión de la tradición mazateca para con nuestra medicina sagrada no está peleada con la religión, porque cuando vienen y nos quieren decir que la Virgen de Guadalupe, que Santo Tomás, que bueno, en fin, podríamos hablar de los santos, de los ángeles y todo eso. Lo formamos parte, ¿por qué? Porque nuestra tradición en la intimidad, cuando estás trabajando con la espiritualidad, no hablas específicamente de un santo o de un ídolo, no. Estás hablando a través de ti mismo, de todo tu proceso de vida, de tu estar en este espacio. ¿Cuál ha sido y qué es la importancia que vas a retomar en la esencia? De decir que no te debes pelear, estás peleado con todo y no tienes identidad. Cuando no pierdes tu identidad, sabes que no tienes que luchar una batalla. Entonces, a través de eso, nosotros hemos retomado la importancia que tiene nuestro masculino y nuestro femenino. No tiene forma, no tiene rostro, sin embargo, lo nombramos porque de una forma es un respeto hacia nuestros antepasados, que nosotros no debemos crear batallas que no son nuestras. Vamos a hacer de este mundo algo mejor, respetando cada credo, cada religión, cada creencia, cada costumbre, cada tradición. De todo, para la espiritualidad, ojo nivel, nuestra religión, la medicina, el amor. Una religión diferente que nos enseña la misma planta, que todo lo que tiene vida tiene que ser respetado. El color no tiene esencia, no tiene, pero es la sensación y la importancia que tú le das a través de ese aprendizaje y a través de este conocimiento.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. So it's a very specific case, and she said it because what happening was La listening for herself as a person who has the tradition of being formed as a Mazateca, but also being formed, or let's say also grow under Catholic understandings, is that everybody has a belief. Everybody has a way of relating to something that creates either the faith and their belief. She says that no matter what is either the ideology, no matter what is what your parents told you on how to relate to spirit, everybody has something, even as an atheist, in which they believe, which is that they believe that they don't believe. And so she said, even that is a way of just finding part of your identity. Of course, she knows that they were colonized and that they were conquered first through language and then through religion. But what happened particularly with a lot of the Catholic Church in the first beginning is that they got there and they start recognizing beautiful things, or they start recognizing elements that the Mazateco people were already having there. And so what they create and their ancestors create was, let's say, a synthesis or a fusion in between their natural traditional beliefs, but also in between these new elements that they were giving to them. So she said that, for example, in the expression of like Virgen de Guadalupe, or the Guadalupe, Virgin, or Mother Mary, or the saints, she could have a lot of conversations like Saint Thomas or Saint George. But it's not about these saints or these images as factual, like idealist, that they follow word by word of what this human create, but it's because at the essence of their spirituality, at their intimacy of their spirituality in their work that they do, it is a way for them to create a metaphor of the process that they are having by the different either teachings or representation of these, images or beings, and in that way connect them into a way that will not fight against their own selves. And so she said that a lot of what also by keeping some of these Catholic, let's say, at least traditions that sometimes are involved in the rituals, are because they also want to honor all of their ancestors that were able to preserve a lot of these traditions by creating a fusion, let's say, with a lot of these Catholic rituals. And this, just to be very she also says, before I go into that other side, that there is also something in that part of their history that is the learning of not judging by anybody's either race or color or traditional belief in regards to their medicine and in regards to their practice, because they kind of like already know and they already experience that by being able to hold what is sacred for them and accept the adaptation that they might have gone or do to some of their own, let's say, original traditions, it is also a way to accept others that might come with different beliefs or different, symbols that they pray, and in that way be able to accept them and to help them whenever they need to heal. So it creates a space of inclusiveness by understanding a little bit of what their ancestors were able to accept and to join both of these two. When I was before referring to a lot of like the history of some like demonic traditions or like voices, I also just want to be very clear that a lot of these condemnations that were given in the times of Maria Sabina, and also, as we all know, they were not just really because of religious principles, but it was because of ways of manipulating and at the same time wanting to have certain type of like control, because we also have to understand that this was an economical boom for the region. It was blossoming, like a town that is up in a mountain suddenly is the most famous town and everybody wants to be there. So it was a way to convince people, and it's also a way of creating certain type of control. And mostly they were more modern religions. So if we really get to think at the base of history, the first religion that really came through the first wave of colonialism was Catholicism. And Catholicism adapted, and that's what Eugenia shares. And that's why in Mexican culture, the Virgin is so venerated, because of course it was a symbol in relationship or in worshiping much more of the feminine, and so they needed to have that symbol, and it was kind of like given to them, and that's why there is all of this faith and passion around this feminine archetype. And she said that in that also for them, they have created this balance of the archetypes between the masculine I'm going to call it in a way that I normally don't call it, but let's say the divine masculine and the divine feminine, which I prefer to call it, in my opinion, just these polarities of existence that have been in many different ancestral wisdom, but they were able to preserve them through this representation of symbols, because it was already part of also their spiritual understanding of things, either if it was veneration of day and light or veneration of the cropping, that is the sun. There are different ways at the essence that a lot of these, at least symbols and prayers, coexist. In relationship, of course, then to condemnation, again, there are interests, like everybody has it, mostly in relation to spirituality. Some more modern religions or second wave religions that enter into the towns, like Christianity, evangelism, they do have a much more modern agenda in creating their own church and holding their own church. And in that much more modern agenda, of course, they use a little bit of this, what we are and what we are not. And so by that, it create a lot of much more still modern type of like condemnation to other practices. That is not what they do. But this could even be not only about sacred medicines, but they will use it if you are a Catholic and you are not an evangelist, you're still a sinner for them. So I just want to give that type of like, interesting parallel that is not just really like a war against their sacred medicines. That said, in for Catholicism and what I have lived and experienced there, you go to some of these Catholic churches. First of all, they are in Mazateco, a lot of them. They're not in Spanish. A lot of their chants are still in Mazateco, which means they are still using their native tongue and language. And they use water, flowers, copal. It's a little bit more dynamic if you have been in Catholic settings in here up in the north. It's a little bit more dynamic. So there is still more of the feeling of relation to the earth. Some of them are open air, some of them, it's still also very ritualistic and very magic, because they were able to really still preserve the essence of the medicine as people and indigenous people, their traditions, and also just bringing it into the ritual of Sunday church.
Thank you so much. And I apologize to those whose questions we didn't get to, but we have reached our time limit. And I'm so, so thankful to you, Miguel, and to you, Doña Eugenia, for such a beautiful talk. It was very well done. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Just want to invite Eugenia if she wants to say some last words. Eugenia, si quieres, ya estamos llegando a tu tiempo, al tiempo del final de esta sesión. Si quieres simplemente dejar un mensaje, una despedida.
Sí. Muchas gracias primeramente por estar compartiendo este espacio con los jóvenes, con la gente que tiene inquietud de querer cambiar esa parte de que tenemos de ideología, a veces mala, cuando tomamos malas decisiones, cuando no le tomamos realmente una importancia a nuestro planeta, a nuestro mundo, a nuestro espacio donde vivimos. Es el momento de poder adentrarnos un poquito más a ese conocimiento antes, cada uno de nosotros, porque tenemos orígenes, tenemos tradiciones, tenemos abuelos, abuelas, donde esa línea familiar no se puede perder, porque es la identidad de cada uno de nosotros. Y después de este pequeño mensaje que puedas compartir, te estoy diciendo ahora, me gustaría despedirme con mi padre nuestro en Mazateco.
Muy bien, permítele, les hago esa traducción y después te puedes despedir de esa manera. So she wants, first of all, to be very grateful for this space of sharing, because it's very important to share in these times, to get to hear and learn from each other, and in that way grow. And she also is very grateful to be sharing this space with people who are curious, just really curious, and have the willingness and have the openness to just also learn, because in learning there is a lot of things that we preserve and It's very good for herself and for all of us to be really honoring from where we come from, and honoring our grandmothers, and honoring our own grandfathers, and honoring our own ancestors, because that also helps us to build the identity of who we are. And so by honoring those type of ancestors, by honoring all those type of teachings, is that we also honor who we are right now. And before she leaves with that message, she just wants to also close with Mazateco prayer in her own way. Ahora sí, Eugenia, adelante.
Claro que sí, y ojalá puedan sentir esta melodía que yo les comparto con mucha energía, con mucho amor, que se puedan ir con un pensamiento positivo.
And she hopes that with this, you can all feel the energy, the blessings, the prayer that she wants to share with all of us.
Naina Shiti Naingami Aingar Kokataya Laiki Atapaina Ki Kwandaliki Pakatama Kusimeliki Wakatama Kusimeliki Ilisonde Honingami Ayashindai, Enyostila, Chiquillo Choningansai, Ichatanaki, Eshitinaki, Hosini Chatalai, Shikuavasai, Quali Baindehi, Najasaki, Eshitokicha, Ashinangansai, Wakatama, Wakatama, Wakatama. Gracias a todos, bendecida noche.
Thank you to all of you. Blessed night to all of you.
Thank you. So grateful.